Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. I was hoping I wouldn't be tempted to bust out my phone and maybe have my. I'm at Thanksgiving. I don't want the family thinking I'm nuts and see me yelling at comic books, but I'm keeping my promise. I'm not busting out the phone if I've got what I think is a mediocre idea that I could just do a podcast on later. I'm busting out the phone if I know I've got something, and I've got something. So look at this: Classic Penis by Charles Schulz. This is a reprint. They've been reprinting Charles Schulz comics for what? Maybe 20, 30, 20 years or so since his death. He died when I was a little kid. It kind of powerfully affected me. Okay, this is relevant to all the things we're talking about social justice and comic books, even though the newspaper comic strip hasn't been the force that it was in American comics. In the very early history, the comic strip is what the comic books came from. The comic strips. The comic strips had this amazing, powerful effect where they were the layman's stories, and they were a shared experience for all kinds of laymen, and people would talk about comic strips and write letters about comic strips like it was a national phenomenon, because they were a national phenomenon, and the comic book was really just an outgrowth of that popularity. And I've said maybe Garfield overstayed its welcome a bit. I don't know if Peanuts overstayed its welcome, because even in the late years before his death, something about these comics powerfully affected me when I was young, and there was a humanness to these characters. And I think there's a reason why you say cartoonist and Charles Schulz. Charlie Brown's big bald head pops into people's heads because not only was Charles Schulz talented in how he drew and how he handled his line, he was also talented in how he observed life, but also very unusual in how he wrote stories about these. These feel like human characters, but they're also so unique that where do you meet someone who's quite like Peppermint Patty in real life? There's almost a fantasy element and a real element within the world of Peanuts. And if you've assumed that Peanuts was just kind of like goofy kid humor and not that serious, go give it another look. You don't get to be an iconic all-American cartoonist, the iconic cartoonist, for nothing, and you don't get to be that overnight. So let's read this, okay? So Charlie Brown and Peppermint Patty. Let's see if I can get it to focus for you guys. So Peppermint Patty says, "It's a beauty contest, Chuck, and for someone like me, it's very depressing. Look, that's the girl who won. See how happy she is? You think that'll ever happen to me, Chuck? No way. I'm not beautiful, Chuck. I'm not beautiful, and I'll never be beautiful. You think I enjoy watching beauty contests? I hate them. Now I'm all depressed. Rats. Say something to cheer me up, Chuck." "Well, I..." Click. Smack. "He's a funny-looking kid, but he knows how to make a girl happy." so Charlie Brown sighs. Okay? This is getting at a lot of the things we've been talking about, you know, the images of beauty in comics. Is it for a male audience or a female audience? The male gaze, feminism. Okay, so look at how universal this is. A feminist could read this and identify with Peppermint Patty. You could be an anti-feminist and read this and identify with Peppermint Patty because her emotion and her desire is human. She wants to be beautiful. But I think there's a sense in which, once again, if you look at this with your feminist lenses on, this show, I don't hate SJWs, I don't hate feminists, but when I look at the world with the feminist lenses on, I start to feel more and more sympathy for them. So what's happened here? Snoopy's turned off the TV and he's kissed Peppermint Patty without her permission. So is this rape culture? Well, if you start thinking that everything is sexist and everything is homophobic and everything is racist and everything is problematic, and then this becomes another triggering moment, and then you're unhappy the whole day because, look, even Peanuts perpetuates rape culture. And then I'm also thinking about Squirrel Girl, okay, right? So I was roasting Squirrel Girl a bit for having that creepy Howard the Duck scene where this lady's French kissing a duck, and the joke is, tee-hee, it's so gross. And it felt skeevy. It felt like you're putting bestiality in a comic for kids. So why am I not offended by this? Well, because this isn't Charles Schulz saying, tee-hee, it's so gross, it's so skeevy. Look at that, kids. She's kissing a dog. Snoopy is almost a human character. That's the point. The reason this doesn't feel skeevy is that for decades, Snoopy started walking on his hind legs and thinking in thought balloons and behaving in ways that no dog would. He's not the dog he was at the very start of the comic. Snoopy became a cartoon, anthropomorphized dog very quick and established himself in kind of the mind of the American conscious as the anthropomorphized beagle, where he feels like almost as a fantasy element, he feels more like a human character, to the point that Peppermint Patty thinks that Snoopy's a funny-looking kid. That Peppermint Patty doesn't quite get that Snoopy's a dog. This isn't a kind of gritty, real-world universe with, mature, creepy online fan fiction logic. This is a fantasy child's universe where this kind of joke can sail, because the joke isn't tee-hee, it's gross. It's not even tee-hee. You don't even tee-hee. I didn't even laugh when I read this. It's just kind of like, that's sweet. He's observed something about, what little girls think about and what little girls like. And, poor Charlie Brown, he's kind of flummoxed and he's not quite on, up on his game. I ship Peppermint Patty and Charlie Brown, by the way. I don't like this Peppermint Patty Marcy ship that the left seems to like. I think this, to me, seems to be one of the most powerful and pure relationships in American children's comics. And it's not even a romantic relationship, because these are young people who will sometimes play at romance, but they're acting out human dramas that adults can identify with. I don't know. Just, okay, go read this. Go pick up those old Peanuts treasuries. I think you can get the digital books on Google now if you don't want a big giant stack of those in your library. But this should be a cultural reference point for you, I think, in how to write, because Schulz had to observe children and adults to create this cast of characters, because there are ways in which his players, his actors, are children and behave like children, but also they will take on sort of adult questions or adult mindsets and adult ideas to become these iconic characters that are unimitated, I think, in the history of comics. Maybe Bill Watterson's Calvin and Hobbes came close to capturing that magic. I think Bill Watterson was a more excellent illustrator in the detail and the beauty he put into his imaginative world, whereas Charles Schulz went for a more simple and straightforward elegance to his style. But even Bill Watterson, I think, nailed Calvin and Hobbes. So I'm not saying one's better than the other, but I think that Charles Schulz and Calvin and Hobbes have that same amazing, powerful, evocative spirit to them. And Charles Schulz gives you a few extra decades worth of comics to read to get a feel for how he views the world and how he sees things. And I think we need some of this spirit in the contemporary comics movement. I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. Why don't you like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you later.